Thank you so much for letting me speak tonight and talk a little bit about what we have been up to in Iceland. So some of you may know we have an ongoing volcanic crisis on what is called the Reykjanes Peninsula in the southwestern part of Iceland. And it's really the largest natural hazard that has affected Iceland in modern times, both in terms of displaced people, but also in socioeconomic terms. But I was thinking before diving deeper into this crisis, I wanted to give you a little bit of context about Iceland and our type of volcanoes that we have. So this is Iceland in the wintertime. This is what it would look like now unless it's completely cloudy. It's between 3 to 4 times the size of Hawaii, and we have a population around 400,000. The capital is called Reykjavík, and the official language is Icelandic, and it was inhabited in 874. And am I doing this right? This is what it looks like in the summer. So it's not always snow covered or ice covered. Of course, Iceland is located up here in the orange box. And so we are also in the middle of the ocean, but while you are on the Pacific plate fed by a hot spot, then we are on top of a divergent plate boundary. But we do also have a hot spot. So here we can see a little bit of regional context. So we have Iceland here. Here we have the mid-oceanic ridge, which is the center of the divergent plate boundary. And it's kind of crisscrossing Iceland in this fashion and going up to the north. And here you see the plume track. I guess you are maybe somewhat familiar with plume tracks here in Hawaiian Islands. So the plume is centered here in this part of Iceland. And I have a different schematic showing this as well. So basically the mid-Atlantic ridge is coming up here. And here we then have a zone of volcanism in the western part. And then we have what we call the eastern volcanic zone and northern volcanic zone. So the spreading is happening across this area here. And then we have the hotspot located approximately here under an ice cap. This is ice caps, the white things here. And then we have, still learning these buttons. Then we also have some seismic zones. So these are primarily seismic zones down here in the southern part of Iceland and then up here in the Tjörnes zone. So this is kind of the tectonics, and we have plate spreading with approximately 1 centimeter per year in each direction here. So this part of Iceland is in the North American plate, and this part here is on the Eurasian plate. And this basically means that if you look a bit unlike Hawaii, if you look on a map, you basically can see here, this is the youngest part of Iceland. So here you see the ages. So this is 11,000 years old, and then it's just getting older and older as we go down here. And you will see that the red colors and the brown colors, so the youngest ages, are basically in this zone. And if you want to find the oldest rocks in Iceland, you go to the east fjords or to the west fjords. And the oldest rocks that we can find are around 15 to 16 million years old. So when we look at our GPSs, we see, of course, the plate movement. And here is an example of what all these GPS measurements across the country looks like over a time period from 1993 to 2004. And you can basically see that one part of the country is moving towards America, and this part here is then reference to the Eurasian plate. So this is what it looks like. It's like the divergent plate, Brian. You kind of can see the movement in this fashion. And this is what our earthquake activity looks like. So our earthquake activity is also primarily centered in these regions here where we have the spreading, and it's either related to tectonics or to volcanism. So we will have volcanoes that are flaring up like this. And so here we have kind of a map of our volcanoes. So in Iceland we have approximately 33 volcanic systems. a few up here in an old abandoned rift zone, and then we have the Reykjanes Peninsula down here, which I'll talk a lot about, going up to the western volcanic zone. Here we have the eastern volcanic zone going up to the northern volcanic zones. And we have a kind of, we divide our volcanoes into these systems, which often consist of rift zones and then central volcanoes with either summit crater and caldera. Not all volcanic systems have a central volcano with a crater. Some of our volcanoes are indeed just fissure swarms. And you can see that 20% of the active volcanic centers are under ice caps, which of course is impacting the volcanic activity quite a lot because it's changing the eruption environment. And in Iceland, of course, also we have had 5 large glaciations during the last 0.8 million years, where basically the entire country have been covered in a big ice cap. And so we have a lot of volcanic features that are created by volcanic eruptions on the ice. And that create different type of landscapes. It's like the lava is not just flowing, it's basically building up mounts. Quite unlike what we see when it's subaerial eruptions. And 90% is basaltic, very similar to the type of material that you have erupted here in Hawaii. And then we have 10% or more that is what we call more evolved magmas. And we have various types of eruption environments. We can have eruptions in the ocean, under the ice, and then of course also subaerial. So we have a large range of hazards that we have to account for when we are monitoring. And just to give you a little bit of insight, here's a very famous eruption, so let's say, that lasted from 1964 to 67, which is up here. It was an eruption at the seabed that created an island, which is still there, slowly diminishing because of erosional forces, and was very nicely described as kind of submarine eruptions. So this is kind of a Surtsayan eruption is something that is referred to in volcanology terms. Then we have big volcanoes here close to the mantle plume. So here we have an eruption from Grindavík in 2011, making a nice eruption cloud with a lot of tephra. And sadly, this was happening in May when we had a lot of new lambs. So a lot of this tephra then was very damaging for the farmers in the area. And this was a year after Eyjafjallajökull, so the farmers felt it was very, very tough time with all this tephra being blown around. But of course, when you have eruptions under ice, you also risk having big floods because obviously you are melting a lot of the ice. And we have evidence of very large-scale floods that can be that can happen during such events. We have a volcano called Katla that last erupted in 1918 and produced a flood during the eruption that was the size of the Amazon River. So this is a very substantial hazard that we are dealing with as well. And then we have these subaerial eruptions where we have nice fissure eruptions that you are very familiar with. We have the kilauea eruptions in 75, 84. And before that, actually 50 years before this recent event happened, we had the event of Heimei in 1973, where 5,000 people were evacuated from the island of Heimei, and where a fissure opened up within the town of Heimei. And overnight, the entire island had to be evacuated. And luckily, it had been very bad weather, so all the fishermen were in harbor and could evacuate people. And then there's like just the final type of volcanic activity I will introduce you to is these very large-scale fissure eruptions that we can have. See, I have to change the slide. This is wrong. We are talking 83, 84. But where we can have these very large-scale volcanic eruptions where we have 15 cubic kilometers. This is It's basically, I guess, something like 10 times what the size of the year 2018 eruption. So these are very large eruptions. So this is a little bit of what we can expect in Iceland. And so the Icelandic Met Office, where I'm now working since half a year, is a multi-hazard agency dealing with various forces of nature affecting the Icelandic society. So it's a meteorological office, but it's doing a very type of hazard assessment. And we are also the state volcano observatory, so nominated by the Icelandic Transport Authority and the International Civil Aviation Organization. And this means that we are producing weekly reports about the volcanic activity to stakeholders. And here's just an example where you can go in to the Icelandic catalog of volcanoes, and you'll see a web page like this where you can see the color codes of each volcano. And right now we are waiting for our next eruption on Reykjanes, so it's yellow. And you can find a lot of information of all the volcanoes if that is of interest. We have 24/7 monitoring at the IMO, where we have natural hazards specialists that are monitoring the volcanoes, the seismic activity and floods, and are making hourly weather observations. We have meteorologists that are issuing the weather forecasts and warnings for the aviation industry, the marine traffic, and for the public. And then we have a group of specialists that monitor avalanches and landslides on top of course, our volcanologists also. And during the day, there's always 2 natural hazard specialists on duty and 2 meteorologists, and 1 of each during night. And then we have the research division, and we will then feed into this monitoring when it's needed. So in order to monitor all these volcanoes, we have a range of monitoring networks, and which is very fundamental for successful monitoring. Here you see our seismic network, around 100 seismic stations distributed, and you can see the pattern repeats itself here. We have most seismic stations, of course, in this zone where we have most volcanoes, so this is where we have most of our stations. This enables us to of course, have very good mapping of our earthquakes and location of our earthquakes. We have a lot of GPS stations. I think it's around 200 GPS stations. These allows us to see the movement of the ground everywhere in these areas. And here's an example. This is also a public website that can be visited, and you can go in and click on each of these stations, and you can kind of see a time series. So this is a time series for a year, where you can see a GPS down here on Reykjanes Peninsula experiencing inflation periods and deflation periods in connection to magma inflow, and then eruptions where we have magma outflow of the system. We have strain meters, we have gas sensors, and we are of course also monitoring our rivers, because a lot of the floods that will be draining from the glaciers are important to monitor through devices that are measuring the water level. We are measuring the conductivity in the rivers also, because this is an indication of whether some of this water are fed by geothermal/volcanic activity under the glacier. And we have gas sensors, and then we have various weather stations and radar network. And it is really is nearly work for superheroes to keep these networks running. It's very difficult conditions to keep these stations running. The Icelandic weather can be very harsh, and we have a very dark winter, so keeping all of these instruments running is not a trivial task and requires a lot of manpower. So that was kind of a bit of the background, and now I want to give you the tour of what has been happening on the Reykjanes Peninsula, which really is a crisis that is ongoing and still evolving. This is a picture here from the 14th of January, where we had our second eruption in this area here. And in the foreground you see the town of Grindavík, where we used to have 3,800 people living. Down here we have the Blue Lagoon, which is a big tourist attraction, and we have a power plant that we are trying to protect. And up here you can see the capital. So, but the Reykjanes Peninsula is kind of the most populated area in Iceland. As I said, we're around 400,000, and probably 250,000 is living around this area, and 300,000 in this part of the country. So it's the most densely populated area. This is the international airport, and this is our most important road. It's connecting us to the world, basically. So we have a lot of critical infrastructure in this area that are vulnerable to lava flows. And when we look a bit closer to the peninsula, we have 6 volcanic systems that are crisscrossing the peninsula. If someone could find some water, then it would be good. So you can see that these systems, they are crossing their way through the peninsula here. And this is what we call an oblique plate boundary. So we are moving, we have this 1 centimeter per year on each side, but the systems are not, its opening is slightly oblique compared to the, or the systems are lying slightly oblique compared to the opening. So we also have a lot of faults in this area. And really, we know that eruptions on these volcanic systems happen in episodes, and the episodes last for 200, 400 years, and then they're quiet for 600 to 1,000 years. And before 2021, the last rifting event ended in the 13th century. And on this map here, you see all the lava flows that was issued during the last rifting episode. And you see that there are lava flows that are running into the suburbs of the capital area. And really, this is something that we are resolving from the geological history. When we are looking into the records, we can see that this is these episodes that are happening at certain times, and then we have this periods of quiescence. So that is what this figure here is telling. Since 2020, we have had 4 volcanic systems showing unrests, showing magma movements. 2 of them have had eruptions, the Fagradalsfjall area and the Svartsengi area. And then we have had 2 additional volcanic systems here that have shown ground movements going up and down, as if we are having magma movements into the roots of the volcano. So this is kind of a new reality, and the people in the area have not experienced volcanic eruptions for basically for their lifetime in this area here. So really, since 2021, we have had 10 eruptions. And before this time, we used to say that we have eruption in Iceland every 3 to 5 years. So you can see that we are kind of experiencing a period of much more volcanic activity to attend to. Thank you.
Where would you like to?
No, this is perfect.
Down there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So the first eruption started in March 19th. In 2021, it was a half a year long eruption. Then we had another eruption in the same volcanic system, Fagradalsfjall, and another one. And then here we had a change, and then another volcanic system started, and have had 7 volcanic eruptions since then. So this is what I'm going to talk a bit further about now. The Fagradalsfjall eruption was really kind of a nice eruption. It was not too intense. It was happening in valleys. This is just pictures from these eruptions. And it happened at a time where COVID had kept people isolated from each other. And suddenly you had this very nice, calm eruption happening basically within an amphitheater. And you could go to the hills around here and sit and watch a volcano. And a lot of people did this. People brought their guitars and went out and was sitting around like having a bonfire and was really enjoying this quite a lot. And in the end, by the end of the eruption, we've had more than 350,000 visitors, which is a lot for Iceland. You know, it's basically the size of the population of Iceland that had visited this spot. And it's by far the most visited volcanic eruption we have had so far. Yeah, there was a lot of different variety to the eruption. We had a period where we had new vents opening up. You also know that from your eruptions that it can evolve, the new vents opening, and we had all kinds of interesting things happening through this time, and could monitor it and calculate the flux from the volcano. So this is basically how many cubic meters per second that was coming out, and these are kind of between 5 and 12 cubic meters per second. So this was all kind of nice. The main hazard of this was basically estimating when these valleys would fill up and overflow. So we were very fortunate with this eruption. And the next eruption, which was then a year later, was much shorter. It was 18 days, and it started actually on top of some of the older lavas from the year before, and erupted down here, and then flowed over the older lava from the year before here, and spread like this. And again, in a very fortunate place, and a spectacle for tourists to visit. The third eruption at the Reykjanes volcanic system was located a bit outside, so a bit further north. You see the other lava flows down here, and it ran into this valley system. And again, the fusion rate was kind of increasing, so the volumetric flux from location was higher in the initial part of this eruption. And we were dealing with quite a bit of moss fires. You can see this picture here. The air quality was very poor. We don't have a lot of vegetation, but moss burns and can produce, you can have moss fires that can go on. And this was one thing that was very dominant in this eruption here. So now we will be looking to what has happened since we changed to the other volcanic system. So actually it was kind of funny. Already by this time we felt like one eruption per year was a bit too much. We could not really handle it. and then another volcanic system which has a different rhythm took over, and then we really had to get up to speed to try to follow what was going on. So really everything's changed by by the autumn of 2023, where we basically started to see that an inflation area that has been over here, so the ground was inflating here, moved to inflation area here. This is what we call Svartsengi, this area here. And all these points here are boreholes because we have the power plant right here. And this is also what the Blue Lagoon is, because the power plant is basically harnessing the heat from the volcanic system. And so what happened on the 25th to the 10th of November, it was that our GPSs was showing that we had quite rapid inflation in this area, and the seismicity was spread out like this. And then by the 10th of November, we had basically 15-kilometer long dike that was being emplaced in this area here. So within one of those defined fissure swarms on the eastern side of the Svartsengi power plant. This dike here produced a lot of fracturing. So here you see a lot of ground motion. I don't know how familiar, this is an interferogram where you basically, each of these rainbow colors are showing you how much movement is happening in this area. And here is a deconvolved image of this where you can kind of see the movement. So these areas here have moved more than 1 meter down So it's a substantial movement, and the movement went straight under the town and out into the ocean, and this meant that the town of Grindavík was heavily impacted on this. A lot of fracturing, a lot of houses that was destroyed, and basically the entire town was evacuated and had to be rehoused elsewhere. And here's just a schematic I wanted to show you, which is a science paper that have come out where it's kind of trying to illustrate what was happening. So we have a magma reservoir here at the Svartsengi area where we saw all the boreholes. And from this magma domain, we have a dike that is propagating this northeast-southwest straight under the town of Grindavík here. And doing so with very high inflow rates. So this was a very rapid event. It was associated, as you saw, with a lot of earthquakes, and it was very uncomfortable for the inhabitants. And many of them actually self-evacuated before evacuation had been issued. So after this event, we have just seen repetition. Every time we have had an event where we have had a dike or an eruption, it starts rising again. And then we have an eruption, it starts rising again. And we have earthquake activity along this area where we have this big dike that was being emplaced in November 10th. And this has given us these 7 eruptions. The first eruption was the December eruption, which was a 3-day-long eruption. It was fairly luckily located. So here again, we have the power plant here. Down here is Grindavík. And our eruption was happening along approximately 4-kilometer long fissure, and it was not traveling that far. You can see it would produce these very nice sheet flows going to both directions. But and at this time, it had been decided that we want to try to protect the power plant, because in Iceland we can really not afford to lose a power plant. We don't have enough electricity to take out a power plant. That's creating too much strain on the electrical network. So barriers was starting to be built at this time around the Svartsengi power plant. And then the next eruption, so they had just finished barriers here and started in January to build barriers around Grindavík because we knew that Grindavík could also be affected about this, and they have just managed to build the barrier. This is a barrier that is running down here, and here you have the eruptive fissure. So most of the eruptive fissure was north of the barrier and diverted the lava flow from Grindavík to the road and to some hot water pipes here. It cross-cut a little bit to the barrier, but after 4 hours into this eruption, another fissure opened up into the town, and 4 houses was buried in this. This was a very tiny eruption. We were very, very lucky in that sense that there was not more magma that came out. This is a bit more than 2.5 million. This is a small eruption. And here is images of the road being covered in magma. And by this time, we just had built this barrier here. So it should be said maybe that this month was particularly bad. Can I go back? No, here, yeah. Because actually what had happened 4 days before this eruption started was that because of all the fracturing in the town, they were trying to fill up the fractures. Some of these fractures was 20 meters deep, and there is water at the bottom of these fractures. So they're starting to fill up the fractures, and both to prepare the town for potentially people being at some point able to move back, and also because we have a natural hazard insurance fund that was evaluating the damage on all the houses, and the people who were evaluating the damage on all the houses had to get around to see the houses. And so for that reason, we would be filling up the cracks. And one of the guys who were working on filling up the cracks fell into a crack and disappeared, and was never found. And so this, just around this time, like the 10th to the 14th of January, I think a lot of people in Grindavík really felt that they were not coming back to this town. At least if you had kids that could run around and fall into cracks. So this was a very difficult moment for people. Then a little bit less than a month later, we had another eruption. And these eruptions, I should say, start with very high effusion rates. So they can run quite quickly. And here, in this case here, we have an eruption that is actually only 26 hours long, but manages to run around 4.5 kilometers. And this eruption cut the main road to Grindavík here. But it also damaged the hot water pipes. This is the hot water pipe being damaged by the lava. And here you see the Grindavík road being buried in lava. And 30,000 residents of Iceland, so this is 10% of the population, were without hot water for 3 days. That was the time that it took for them to reconstruct the piping, which was incredible. They had to make a road over the new lava and basically lay a new water pipe over the new lava, because there was our hot and cold water system is not redundant. We don't have other ways to supply those 30,000 people with hot and cold water. So that's, of course, is also something has made us think quite a lot. There are a lot of people spending time on thinking about having redundancy in the system, because it's clear that it's quite vulnerable. Then we had the March eruption. So this is the longest eruption we've had so far, 54 days. This one again cut the Grindavík road, but it did not destroy the hot water pipes. And we had some of the lava going down here on this side on this side of the barriers, here on this side. So it was diverted by the western part of the barriers. But really, compared to some of the other eruptions, it was not too many things was destroyed. We had to reinforce these barriers here. The lava flows started to inflate and go over, so they were reinforced. And this is kind of just to say that this is a constant battle. The barriers are being heightened, and every time it has diverted lava flows, then you have to heighten the barriers. Then we had the May 29, so less than a month after the last eruption had stopped, we had a new eruption. And this eruption again starts very intensively. You can see here like how the sheets of lava is just running very quickly. And it was running over the road here just north of Grindavík, and eventually it also ran over the road here and went over some of the barriers a little bit here. And each of these times we basically have an evacuation of those that are in Grindavík, which are very few at this point, and the people at the Blue Lagoon. It is an effort to try to keep business and running in the town. And since this is such a long-lasting crisis, authorities are really trying to enable that people can keep having their business, including, for instance, the Blue Lagoon. But it means that, of course, there are people in the area, and we have to have very good evacuation routes, and we need to provide information about the timings of when lava can be where and which roads will be cut, can potentially be cut when. In this eruption, we had 3 paved highways inundated by lava, gravel road tracks that were covered, high voltage power lines affected, damage up to optical cables, and minor damages to communication mast owned by the US Navy here on this site here. So Iceland is favorably located in the North Atlantic, is important location for a lot of communication in the North Atlantic. So, yeah. And here you see an example. This is an example of the barriers here you see in the background. The barriers actually work like that they always have holes in the roads, and then you have extra material. So every time there's an eruption starting, we have bulldozers in the area that hurry up and take the material and shovel it in front of the road. Because we of course need to get through to those areas, and the people working at the power plant need to get into the power plant. So these holes in the barriers are being closed all the time. You can see the lava coming, and then later in the eruption we had the lava was going up to the barrier here, and it was basically inflating, growing upwards, and then it was spilling over the barrier, but it was very minor. So the power plant was still safe. Nothing happened to the power plant. And here, in August, September, we had the 6th eruption. And this eruption was the biggest eruption so far. There's been a general trend that the eruption size and the intensity of eruptions are increasing over time, which is of course quite worrying. So we are kind of constantly having to project that the scenarios are gonna grow. But we were very fortunate with this large eruption. It was a 6-kilometer long fissure that was opening up, but it was opening up to the north. And to the north, the lava kind of get trapped in a lot of faults and sinks. So actually nothing really happened in this eruption. Like no damages happened to any roads or anything. But of course it keep a reminder for us that if we get such an eruption to the south, we will be in big trouble. And then the last eruption we've had so far was in November, 18 days long eruption. And here we had the lava flow. The intensity was a bit lower than the previous eruption. So until this eruption, we had seen this kind of increasing trend in volume and intensity. This eruption was slightly kind of premature, if you can say it. So it's kind of something failed in the magma domain a bit earlier. So we did not get as high initial fusion rate, but it was more sustained, and we actually got the longest lava flows in this eruption here, like 4.5 kilometers from the fissure. And the lava again went over the road. It went over the hot and cold water pipe again, but by this time it has actually been insulated, and the insulation holds, so nobody lost their hot and cold water. But the Blue Lagoon lost their parking lot, which was here. So yeah, and a lot of lava came all the way here and inflated and was just about to run over when the vent that was feeding this flow shut down. So again, we were fairly lucky that these barriers was not overrun. All right, so we have this continuing volcanic crisis. By now, it's basically 14 months. And it has large escalating economic costs. We are building these lava flow barriers. We need to rehouse a lot of people, and the Icelandic state had made a deal with the Grindavík citizens. Of course, the people which houses was damaged was covered by the natural hazard insurance fund that we have. But there are, of course, a lot of people that have houses that was not damaged, but still could not live there because kind of the entire environment is damaged. And the Icelandic state decided to buy, if people wanted, the Icelandic state would buy the house so they could actually have money to buy a new house somewhere else. So this is, of course, a gigantic cost to buy an entire village of houses, because most people did not want to live there. The crisis continues to evolve in geographic extent. The degree of disruption and long-term monitoring and risk assessment is needed. And it's, as I said, the largest natural hazard that have affected Iceland in modern times, both with respect to the displaced people and the socioeconomic impacts. And the displacement has been really tough for the people of Grindavík. It has been difficult, of course. We have a housing crisis in Iceland, so going out and finding new homes is difficult, and you will not get the same size home as you had. And we have, of course, everybody have kind of lost their social life and their neighbors, and they have lost their sports facilities, and they're kind of spread on the Reykjanes Peninsula. A lot of people are living in the capital area, but also elsewhere. There are a lot of attempts to try to help with the mental stress that these people have been going through. It's known that a lot of the kids are also having a difficult time because they have basically not necessarily any of their friends around anymore. So this is very difficult. There's trying to make various arrangements so people can meet and the kids can meet and so on. And this is just an example of the cracks in the houses that makes it very evident that a lot of these houses are just not livable anymore. So to summarize, in Iceland for us, this is a volcanic crisis that has an unprecedented scale. As much as maybe it's like the main thing has been that the faulting have damaged so much of the village, the lava has not necessarily costed many houses at this point, as much as we are having a huge effort in order to try to still protect the power plant and all our infrastructure. It's prolonged, and it has a lot of economic impacts. And so today this is our kind of model of what is happening in the magma domain. We see that it's rising, and then we have eruption, then it's rising and have eruption. And here you see this is the last 7 eruptions we've had. And right now we are here. So we are waiting for the next eruption. We have, in the Krapla fires, this lasted for 9 years, this kind of rifting episode. I kind of hope the fact that it's kind of a higher frequency than we saw in Krapla, that this volcano get tired faster than 9 years. That would be very helpful for a lot of people. So with that, I just want to say thank you and welcome questions.
Anyway, George brought up the lights, which is what I wanted him to do. So, if you're asking your questions, is it okay, if we go on for 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'll...
repeat the question so the folks here at the recording may not be able to hear you.
Yeah, okay.
So, the chemical composition of Icelandic lava, is it more similar to Hawaiian or more similar to some of the subduction volcanoes?
It's more similar to Hawaiian. Yeah. So it's basically what we call basaltic lava, and it's very fluid, moves very easily. Yeah. Yeah, over here.
You talked at the beginning about other systems were showing evidence of like magma movement, like the Grindavík system.
Yeah.
Is that still ongoing? Can you talk a little bit about the evidence you've seen in that specific system?
So we basically have inflation, deflation going on in Grindavík. I think it is, I can't remember when the last time we saw inflation. It was, I think it's 3 or 4 times we have seen that it was inflating and then it was deflating a bit and then deflated again. Yeah, so this is kind of, this is something we know from GPS and our radar interferometry. We do also have geothermal systems, so it keeps also being a discussion about what is the geothermal system doing. But given the fact that we know that we have these volcanic systems that often erupt at in the same period of time, we should be prepared for that. It's magma movements in this area, and
Have been earthquakes really there?
oh, we have a lot of earthquakes there. Yeah, yeah, we have seen that persistently as well. Yeah, yeah. Okay, one here.
The concept of a barrier to hold back lava is one I never thought about before. What are those barriers made of?
Yeah, it's basically made of the material that is in the surroundings. So it's a mix of sandy material and the lava. Sometimes they're exploding to get old lava flows to make the barriers. Yeah, and then they basically they just compress it, and then they have a specific dimension that they are going for to make the most stable. We have engineering companies that are generally constructing these barriers for snow avalanches that are doing this. And the first eruption, the 21 eruption at Fagradalsfjall, was the first one where they were kind of testing things because they were like, can we just basically bulldoze material up and this will be a barrier? Does that work? I mean, how there's not too much literature how to build a lava barrier. So they were testing different things at this point. And of course, by now there is a lot of experience. Yeah, here in the back.
I have 2 questions actually, and the first one is, if the Greeks were to ask for your advice, what would you tell them about their current situation? Earthquakes and eruption. And then second, have you had a chance to see one of our recent eruptions? And if not, who's the radical?
I was very lucky. So I have realized I have completely failed to repeat the questions. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so I was very lucky to arrive on the 4th of February, and my very good friends from the USGS, they was like very smart and said, oh, let's go and have a look now. And we managed to see the ending of the last eruption. I think what is going on, I assume you are referring to the Santorini. Yeah, I think this volcanic system is very different. So of course there's an island in the middle where you can have lava flows, but then you have, I don't know too much about this volcanic system, so I think I prefer not to say too much to them. I think there are other people that would be better expert on this system. Yeah. Yeah, here.
You talked about the safety of people doing inspections. Is there a reason they don't use drones more so that individuals don't have to be on the ground doing this inspection?
Okay, so the question was about inspections and why there's not more use of drones. The type of inspections that I was referring to was people who are inspecting people's houses. So basically seeing how cracked up it is and how damaged it is. That's kind of requires people to go into the houses. So of course you can get drones that can go into houses, but I think this is it's often the observations you do, you kind of it's better done by a person. Drones are used widely for a lot of other things though. So we have, a lot of the crack mapping. So there's been intensive mapping of the cracks there. We have both used drones just to map the surface of the cracks, but also drones because it's dangerous just to walk around. So this becomes very important. And then we also have had drones with radar on it to map the cavities, because not all cracks are developed. So there might be a topsoil that is still basically hanging over a cavity. In order to map those, there has been used radar on drones and also magnetometers to try to map those cavities. And we also use drones for monitoring some of the volcanic activity. So, yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
So some years ago, there was an eruption, I believe, in Iceland that shut down European airspace.
Yeah, yeah.
Was that close to here, or was that closer to the middle of the island?
Yeah, I can show you where it was. So this was the Eyjafjallajökull eruption, the tongue twister. No, yeah, nobody wanted to in the news to pronounce this volcano's name. So I just need my map of Iceland here. Let's just go to the volcanic system thing here. So this was this one here. So the capital is here. This is the Reykjanes Peninsula. So this was down here. And basically, unusually, for that time when it was erupting, we had very consistent winds to Europe. Like Iceland have very changeable weather, but during those 6 weeks we had mainly weather that was sending winds and ash straight to the Brits. And this was it was kind of funny because it was a time short after the crash. We had a big financial crash in Iceland in 2008. And I don't know the details, but a lot of money had been borrowed from the UK, and they wanted it back. So there was the UK was trying to sue and make Iceland pay for a lot of money. And so the joke was that we are not giving you cash, but ash. So, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, here.
I just wanted to say, having watched all these recently, how creative and the people have been in Iceland, and to have their dump trucks and your machines with right away closing up your, fixing your roads. It's just been very impressive.
Yeah, I think it's they have been doing an amazing job, and it is really quite special to go in this area and see. There are so many enormous trucks, and they are constructing. Sometimes they are constructing day and night because we have an eruption and we maybe have a month to increase the height of the barriers, and they calculate that they need maybe 60 million cubic meters, and they can do so and so much on 12-hour shifts. Then they realize, okay, we have to do nights. So they're driving in complete darkness right now. We have complete darkness for a big part of the night, of the day, or whatever we should call it, the 24 hours, and they're driving without being really able to see much, and moving this material, and they're doing it sometimes in areas where they know they are close to the fissure. But so far, I think people feel very comfortable with that they can manage to drive the trucks away or on higher grounds and then evacuate. So there's, they are doing an amazing job. I mean, some of these guys, they have been, some of these barriers that when they are about to breach, you have to increase them. So you have a lava flow that is inflating and cracking, and they are driving up there in the night and moving material onto the barrier. And it has been really mind-blowing for me to visit and see what they're doing, and to think about, okay, you're doing this in minus 10 degrees in stormy weather, and you're putting this material on these barriers so they're ready in time. So yeah, I totally agree. And there's a lot of experience. There was not so long ago we had a public meeting in a town not so long away, and this town was worried that we are only thinking about Grindavík. They are on the northern side, they're a bit further away, but the activity in the August-September eruption was getting closer to them, and they were worried that we kind of forgot them. And we had this public meeting where a lot of different stakeholders were available to kind of tell what they can do and what they are doing to prepare. And they were saying, well, you know, the road authorities, we have a lot of experience with reconstructing roads. We can construct roads just on 1 to 2 days new lava. That's not a problem, you know. Or and the people from the what do we call it, the water supply companies, it was like, yeah, and we have a lot hot and cold water pipes available, so we can just reconstruct the pipes very quickly. We have a lot of experience by now. So, yeah, very odd experience have been built up. Yeah.
Gro, we have time for one more question.
Okay, yeah, here.
I hope I'm the best one. So you said they build the roads on the hot lava in 2 days?
Yeah.
And it was cool enough to drive on?
Yeah, so you basically have a crust. Yeah, I mean, it's not recommended that you stop. It is steaming on the sides. So, and we, of course, I mean, it is this thing where we have the Blue Lagoon is opening, so we have a lot of tourists that are driving these. So it's really, we are trying to really make sure that they're not stopping, because of course it's quite an experience. Yeah, it is, you know, it is warm, the road, and so it's not recommended that you stop. But yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.